He would drive 25 miles from where we lived, passing other liquor stores to go further out because he didn't even want people to see him buying the liquor.
Hello, everyone. It's Monday and shit is wild out there. I'm your host, Ricky.
I'm Jules.
I'm Kenny.
And we will be off video today because the Scrump sisters.
Scump.
The Scump sisters had a bit of a dust up just then and then sat around and talked about it and cried for 3 hours like totally normal people.
We hate crying. Clearly.
It was a doozy.
Yep. But, you know, we're the better for it. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to go and fight with your siblings today.
For 4 hours.
Such as making a podcast with your sisters.
We are the Scump Sisters. If you don't already know who we are, then I would just go back and listen to our other episodes rather than me explain it to you, because I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing that who's heard it. Well, I guess it's only 12 times now. But you can follow us on all of the socials. We are on YouTube at LukeWhoIsYourFather.com. We are on TikTok at LukeWhoIsYourFatherPod, at JulesWhoIsYourFather, and at RickyJump. And we are on Instagram at LukeWhoIsYourFather, at RickyJump, and at KennyK23. We do so appreciate your reviews, both good and bad. We really try to appreciate those bad ones. They really build our character. You just keep going.
Thicken our skin up.
And if you haven't already, if you could go like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, write your thoughts in that little comment box. Let us know what you want to see more of. Let us know what you want to see less of. Let us know what stories you want to hear, and share this podcast with a friend, foe, or sister that you're fighting with. That would also be great. Now for...
support us on Patreon.
Oh my God. And our Patreon. We're getting more subscribers, which is so exciting. You can find us on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/LukeWhoIsYourFather, or go to their app and enter Luke Who Is Your Father. We're doing happy hours. We're doing special episodes. We're doing spotlights if we want. Basically, we're doing anything we want. And that's the whole point. It's somewhere to have a little bit more fun and a little bit less crying and heaviness.
Yeah, and if there's anything that you would like to hear that we're not doing, please let us know. Also, we're wrapping up interviewing for season 2. We're always going to need more content. We always are going to need to talk to more of you beautiful people. So if you have a story of your own to share of the Who's Your Daddy variety, you can submit on LukeWhoIsYourFather.com, where you can also read our bios, any mentions in the press or on other podcasts, and see all of the platforms that we're streaming on.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And now for the question of the day. Kendall, what is your favorite podcast that is not ours?
Oh, man.
Wow.
I feel like that changes like week to week at the moment. Red-handed, I think. Pretty much, I cycle through the true crimes. So I'll just do Morbid, Red-handed, and First Degree. Those are my 4.
We love those ladies. Wow, those are all ladies, right?
They're all ladies.
Yeah, I
and
don't like a dude except like Dax Shepard. He's cool, but I don't like dude podcasters.
I got to see Red-Handed live in Dallas this year. It was this year, right? And they are fucking incredible. It was like one of the most fun experiences of my life. We could only pray and hope. I don't even know what a tour for us would look like, but just the difference between the podcast and seeing them live. Hannah and Cerruti, geez, you ladies are something.
We really love those ladies. All of the true crime ladies, and only the true crime ladies. Just kidding. We love you, Payne Lindsay.
If anybody who listens to Morbid and wrote a listener tale about finding her long lost father recently, hit us up because I want to talk to you.
Yeah, send us your listener tales about your fathers.
Well, I just listened to one today where I was like, this listener tale. We
Bring them
need
on.
to talk to her.
Bring them
Yeah.
on right over
Wow.
here.
Yeah.
Bring them
I
on right
love
over
that.
here.
Yeah.
Amazing. Jules?
Oh, man. I think I have to go. Obviously, there's recency bias, but you just said Payne Lindsay, which up and vanished. I love an investigative podcast.
Kendall still has to listen to that.
Are they unsolved?
No,
No,
it is one
he's
case, and
literally
he's the
trying
reason
to
they
solve
solved it.
Oh,
during the
shit.
podcast. It's amazing. He has the most incredible voice, Payne Daddy.
Yeah, he's our true crime daddy.
He is our true crime daddy. The name of the podcast has changed. It was the Piketon Massacre, and now it's the Idaho Murders.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they have like an overarching name, but it's a bunch of journalists that really do deep dives into the Piketon Massacres was crazy, and then obviously the Idaho Murders. They just do a really good job, and I love them. And I need to branch out of true crime podcasts.
I started listening to true crime podcasts on Amazon Music at the beginning of this year because it was so detrimental to my Spotify Wrapped, but I have since regressed.
Yeah.
Oh my God. My Spotify Wrapped is so disappointing because all I listen to is podcasts. But that would be so fun. We're going to do, I'm deciding this right now. First of all, we're going to do a Luke, Who Is Your Father playlist.
Ooh.
And then we want, at the end of the year, I'll remind you, don't worry, but we want to see all of your Spotify Wraps.
Yes.
And we can rap about it on the Patreon or something. But we want to see those. Some people, I think that there are two camps of people who hate to see other people's Spotify Wrapped, and those are obviously bad people, and people who love to see other people's Spotify Wrapped, and those are obviously good people.
We look forward to it all year.
Ricky, your favorite podcast?
Yeah, so I don't know if I've talked about it on the pod or just on our socials, but I made a New Year's resolution to not listen to any true crime podcasts because it was truly a compulsive behavior for me. So I stopped doing that this year, and now I have my regular rotation. Obviously, Armchair Expert. I really wanted to not like that podcast, and
It's
it is
good.
so good. And they have a lot of podcasts under that umbrella. So there's also Flightless Bird, which is a New Zealander trapped in America and just investigating all things what makes America tick. It is so good. You're Wrong About, which is where they sort of debunk things that have been perpetuated in the media. And then, of course, we have This Is Actually Happening. That happens every Tuesday. Great day. Those are my favorites.
You also did tell me about True Crime Bullshit,
Oh, yeah.
which is
See, I was bad.
such a deep dive into the Israel Keys case. And that guy is, I mean, an incredibly talented researcher.
I thought you were going to say an incredibly talented murderer.
I know. I thought you were talking about Israel Keys as an incredibly talented researcher.
No, he's a really good researcher, and the music that he incorporates into his episodes.
Oh, the music's the best.
It is so, yeah, that was a good one.
We would also be remiss not to mention if you are not so into Zimmerda or any of the other ones I listed, and you like podcasts more similar to this one, you would be crazy not to listen to DNA Surprises. Remember, we just interviewed Alexis, and if you don't remember, then go back and listen to her because she's so amazing. And that brings me just really nicely into introducing our guests for this week.
What a beautiful segue.
Love a segue.
That was talented.
Nice.
Hosts of the Family Twist podcast, we have Kendall and Corey. They are so incredible. The cutest couple. I want to go hang out with them on the East Coast in their pool. Kendall has a really, really beautiful adoption story that we're bringing to you all. It is obviously not without its bumps and bruises, and this will be a two-parter, so just strap in.
Two-parter.
But this week, we're really going to talk to Kendall about his upbringing and his adoptive parents and how he made his way out into the world after that. So without further ado, please enjoy Kendall and Corey of the Family Twist podcast.
We're doing well. And thanks so
Good.
much for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Of course, we are elated to have you. Where are you calling in from today?
We are in New Hampshire. Most people probably had never heard of Rochester, but that's where we live. Lots of other Rochesters are much more well known than Rochester, New Hampshire,
Yes.
but we're right by the seacoast area.
Well, we're so excited for you guys to tell your story today. We know it's very Kendall forward, but Corey, we want to hear yours as well. Before we get into it, as you may or may not know, we always start with our question of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And this season, our prompt is tell us about the last time you. So I would love to hear about the last time that you had secondhand embarrassment so badly that you felt the cringe to your core.
Wow.
Oh man.
Huh.
I mean, the first thing that came to mind, but this is like years and years ago. Are you familiar with the comedian actor Jay Moore? Does he ring a
I
bell?
think so.
Do you ever see Jerry Maguire?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
He's like the douchebag
Oh,
blonde guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing him, and like I'm not a salacious interviewer, but for whatever reason, he was going to be at the same film festival that his ex, and his ex was like dating Bobcat Goldthwait at the time, and I asked something about that, and he just like boom, just like totally shut down. He's like, he was done.
Wow.
And then I got a call from the publicist saying he canceled the rest of the interviews for the day that he was doing. And what did I say? Oh, so
All right.
yeah. So I don't. Yeah. So that was my one attempt at like tabloid style journalism, and it really smacked me back in the face. So so I stopped doing that.
Did you say his ex was dating Bobcat Goldthwait?
Yes, you heard that right.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Who is Bobcat Goldthwait?
Another.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
comedian.
another comedian. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
They
Things
had a
you
little
learn.
rivalry going on or something probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was so canceled his interviews for the rest of the day. He really took a shot to that old ego.
I like it.
Yes.
He made an impression.
And
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Kendall, what about you? Can you think of one?
Yeah, the only thing, it actually kind of relates to my story. The very first time that I went with my brother and dad and uncle and friends to my family's property in extreme North New Hampshire, we were all pretty drunk and sitting around a campfire. And I don't know why I was dancing. There was music, but I don't know why I was dancing otherwise. But I fell and hit my head on a log. And and they're all like, they don't, I mean, yes, they care that I fell, but they were all trying to take pictures of me. It was like, could somebody help me? I'm bleeding,
Oh my
that
gosh.
sort of thing. And but yeah, and
Okay.
You are dancing.
yeah,
That sounds like something we would do though, probably take pictures
Oh,
of
yeah.
each other.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Kendall,
Okay.
when we first started dating, like we kind of loved to go dancing. We went dancing all the time. And then, we got a little bit older, and then these friends of ours in Oakland, California had it was like game night, but it always turned into like 80s dance party in the dark.
Yeah.
And Kendall took down our good friend Rachel, and they both tore the meniscus in their knee.
we both,
my
like we
gosh,
both,
at the same time.
Yes.
like permanent injuries after this one party.
Yes.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. I want to go to your party.
It wasn't. And the funny thing is, I guess that wasn't embarrassing per se, except that, I feel badly for Rachel that we still commiserate about our bodies and our injuries based on
my
those
gosh.
parties. Yep.
No
Ugh.
joke.
Well, the reason that I asked about secondhand embarrassment, which I love that you just went firsthand anyway, was I was on BuzzFeed this morning because I still do that. And they had published an article about like cringy things, staged things that people do on the internet. And it was pulled from Reddit. And it was just like people posting like, couldn't get the COVID vaccine today because my muscle kept breaking the needle.
Oh my god.
Or my child stacked up all of their toys today and I took half of them and said, that's socialism. And they said, not in my America. And just, I read it and was like, I need to subject other people to this terror today because I want to crawl out of my own skin. Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard any of our stories, but you are in great company.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Kendall, Corey, you have your podcast, the Family Twist podcast, because you, Kendall, were thrown through quite the loop yourself.
Hmm.
And your sort of entire life story and what got you up to this point is so fascinating. So we would love to just start at the beginning and work our way into your adoption story and everything that you've found out henceforth. So why don't you take it away and just tell us where and how you grew up?
All right. Well, I grew up in a tiny, tiny town named Gosnell, Arkansas, which is the very, very northeast corner of the state. And I always knew I was adopted. My parents, from the time can remember, would always tell me, most moms and dads get stuck with whatever kid that they're given, but we got to choose you. They always made me feel really special. And, they couldn't have kept it a secret because my hometown is about as big as this room that we're sitting in. So, it, it was known, right? They had been trying to have kids. They got married really young. They were 18 and 19 when they got married, but they immediately started trying to start a family. And they had a couple of miscarriages. And by the time my mother turned 30, they kind of told her that she probably would never be able to, carry a baby full term. I don't really know the specifics of why. Um, I don't know that she knew, but they immediately started the adoption process, which took a long time. And they went through the state. And I mean, to some degree, I get that they were thorough, which is great, but they were ready to they wanted to
Mhm.
start their family. And I remember the stories about them, saying that they had so many home visits and, psychological assessments. And it's just, I always joke with Corey and say, people can just pop out babies right and left. And my mom and dad were like great people, and they were, struggling to make this happen, and also worried about becoming too old. They
Mhm.
were, because if mom was 30, dad was 31, and, their fear was that people would want to give babies to younger couples,
Mhm. Yeah.
so it did take about 6 years to finalize everything. And as
So
tacky.
I don't want to, I'm so sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. Does that mean that they had been actively trying to have babies for 10 years and then had to wait another 6?
Hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they were married for 17 years by the time they got me.
And they were trying from the very beginning. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not, the first
Yeah.
year, but they were kind of they weren't going to college,
Hmm.
they were already in jobs. They just felt like they wanted to get going,
Yeah.
right as probably older teenagers, or maybe 20 years old.
Yeah.
So, which was a lot more common, I think, back then.
Well, and especially for the geography, I
Yep.
think. Yeah.
Yep. And they already had friends that were, having children, and
Mhm.
which also kind of, I don't want to say made them feel alienated, but it's weird, right? Because a lot of their friends' children are a lot older than I am, so
Mhm.
Hmm.
it was weird for them, I think. But especially being in a small town where there weren't that many people to be friendly with to begin with,
Yeah,
but
and you stop having things in common with people.
right, right. You don't get invited to the same parties, and, that sort of thing. But um, they were ecstatic. But, I always laugh and say that I used to have all the photos. I don't know that I do now, but they actually got like a set of 6 photos of babies. And I was like, "You literally chose me from the picture book?" Like, I was like, "What?"
You must have
And
been a really cute kid.
yeah, exactly. Well, my mother said that she couldn't really even look at it. She felt so guilty, like, thinking that, I'm choosing the baby based on, how
Right.
it looks. But it was a mix of boys and girls. And my dad was the complete opposite. He was like, "No, this kid looks cute. I think we should get this one." You know what I mean? Like, and
You're not of the swiping generation.
right, right. And and that's kind of how they got me was, dad had said, "Yep, this one will do." And because, it was a different time, and I don't know how it would work nowadays, but they never met me until the day they got me. I mean, when they were when I was handed to them, which my mother loved because she said it made it feel really organic. Like, like if she had given birth, she wouldn't have
Yeah.
seen the baby until the day that it came.
Mhm.
So for her, that was the right way to have it happen. But the story goes that I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I lived for 1 month of my life in one orphanage in Arkadelphia, and then the second month in Texarkana. And Texarkana is where my parents drove to get me. And they did it up. I mean, they send out the little cards that say, we have a new baby, and they had enclosed photos, and it was a big deal, and their friends really helped them celebrate, and it was obviously a long time coming, for them. So it was fantastic. And
That's beautiful. I think
Yeah.
Julianne and Kendall's
Mhm.
parents sent out a notification that said Christmas came early at the Scabos.
Yeah, I was
in
gonna say,
July.
sounds very, very familiar. They did the
Yeah.
same thing, sent out the cutest photo, and just were really, it sounds similar. It sounds
yeah.
like they were just really, really excited to
Oh,
meet you.
Yeah, it's really the
yeah.
mark
And share
of
with
parents who
everyone.
are excited.
Yeah.
Right, right. And so I only had my father's father and my mother's mother were the 2 that were living by the time I was born, but they weren't in good health, and so my parents actually purposely chose godparents for me who were much more like grandparent age, so that,
Mhm.
if the worst happened, and it did, by the time I was 2, those 2 existing grandparents were also gone.
Wow.
So it was great that I had the Tullys were their names. I called them Nanny and Papa
Mhm.
Tully, and they were just like my grandparents. I knew they weren't, but they treated me that way and celebrated everything with us, and it was a great way for my parents to do it.
Yeah.
Nanny and Papa Tully, did you watch Game of Thrones?
Yes. Yep.
Were you guys obsessed with that?
Not the best reference, but exactly. And
I mean, Catelyn is a G, and
Yeah.
she is a Tully. She is a little bit insufferable at times, but
Yeah.
ultimately
Yeah.
a badass.
But these
So it
people
sounds
were
like, go ahead.
these were like salt of the earth,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
So it sounds like, were you an only child then?
Yep. Yep. And when I was 4, my mother and dad seriously started talking about trying to adopt again. Now, what they had been told is because they'd already been through it once, that it wouldn't take 6 years because my mother didn't want there to be 10 years between me and, another child. But they didn't, and which in retrospect probably worked out well because by the time I was 6, I didn't know it at the time, of course, but my mother had been diagnosed as terminally ill. And so, of course, it was hard enough for my dad to be a single dad after she died when I was 10. And he thinks about, he would always say to me, "Gosh, I can't imagine if I had had another, younger child on top of that." And not that people don't do it, and not that he wouldn't have loved the child. It was hard enough for him when she died. He uh, kind of fell apart. He
Yeah.
he was they had been married for 27 years, and she was the love of his life, and we didn't use the word codependent back then, but that's totally what he was. I mean, he
Oh,
was one
right.
of those people who he needed her in a
Yeah.
strange way,
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of incredible. I was waiting to hear what your parents' like current marital status and stuff
Mm,
is because getting married so young. And then I know that fertility issues puts a lot of strain on a marriage. So having like them being married so young and then have 10 years of trying and then like 6 more years of going through the like harrowing adoption process, like they must have
Mhm.
had just a really, really strong marriage.
And I
They
think
did.
they grew up together. You know,
Yeah.
those are
Yep.
like transformative years of your life. So they became the people that they were going to become together.
Yeah, I
somehow.
wouldn't. Yeah, their frontal lobes
Yeah.
developed at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, before I'm so sorry to hear that about your mom.
Yeah.
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 Let's spend some more time with her
Mhm.
before. So,
Mm.
what was it like growing up in Northeast Arkansas? And how were your early years?
It's funny. That area, it was and still is so, so, so conservative, and my parents weren't. And so I always used to tease them. I mean, I picked up on that really early, and their friends also seemed pretty, moderate, if not liberal. And I would joke with them when I was like 5 years old. I'm like, "Why do we live here? Like, why like, you guys don't seem to fit in with these weirdos." And, it was one of those things like, well, this is where we're from. And,
Mhm.
they didn't have a lot of family there, but they definitely put down roots. And my dad sort of wanted to stay there originally because both sets of parents were still living, at the time
Mhm.
that they bought their land, they built their home, and so for them it was just kind of where they lived. It's a tough, place to be, I think, and especially if you are liberal and open-minded. And I already thought, when I was a small-ish child, I already thought I must be at least bisexual.
Mhm.
And talk about what great parents I had. I was very open with them about that when I was like 8, you know? There's a cute story. One of my friends had an older brother that was in high school, and my parents put in a pool, and
Oh, I
my
already know where this is going.
and my dad was always away. He was working. He was a workaholic, and he had this ill wife. And so when he wasn't trying to take care of her, he was working his full-time job. He started a business right before she got sick. So he was trying to run his company as well as work his full-time job. He was super busy. And so I would work on the pool some, but my mom thought it would be a good idea to hire this teenage guy as a pool boy. And this is
I
an
mean, does
era.
it get any more quintessential?
Yep. And she was ill, but she enjoyed when his name was Mike, and Mike would come over. And this is an era where mm, people did wear speedos. I mean, when they weren't in, but Mike enjoyed, I think, the attention. And I remember my mother would be, I won't say glued to the window, but she was watching to be sure that Mike was doing it right, right? And I'd be sometimes standing beside her, and she would say things like, "Oh my God, he's cute, isn't he?" And I would be like, "Yeah, he is." And and I was like 8, and so she definitely picked up on,
Yeah.
the vibe. And
The vibe.
yeah, I mean, and they completely embraced it. And it's funny when I came out when I was 24, uh, people from my hometown would say to me how embarrassed and ashamed my parents would be of me. And I'm like, well, kind of fuck you, because I know they wouldn't feel that way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like my parents weren't the type of people that would have said that to other, you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, they're
Yeah.
not gonna go like, "Oh, Kendall thinks the pool boy's cute." You know what I mean? That's not what they would say. But it's so interesting how people in sort of small town America like to imagine that they understand what your
Mhm.
family dynamic was like. I'm like,
Mhm.
"You don't know us, and you don't," you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, you don't know what we said in private. And my father, after my mother passed away, I mean, he was very pragmatic about it. He was like, "Kendall, being a gay and out in this town is probably not smart." And he
Mhm.
was right. I mean, I never thought it was a possibility anyway, because, I
Mhm.
was caught up in the religious side of that stuff as well as the social implications. And I kind of never thought that I would ever say those words anyway, but he gave me some good, like, just be careful out there because
Yeah.
he worried that, people could be brutal. And I think they could have been. And even though, um, people called me gay when I was in junior high, you know what I mean? Like for no good, you know what I mean? Like whatever, it's because I was smart and popular, and the boys had a hard time with that sometimes, because the girls usually wanted to go out with me and not them. So, it
Hell
just
yeah.
it is what it is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, well, you shouldn't, you know, be who you are. But anyway, so maybe that's
Have
the
you seen
problem.
that? And it's finally circulating on TikTok again, but I think it was a YouTube video. First of all, the gay guys. It was when gay marriage was up for debate, and it's a bunch of gay guys just saying, "That's fine. Don't let us marry each other. We will take your girlfriends," and like all the reasons that they would make better partners, and it was hilarious. It just reminded me of that.
Yeah. It's so, I have some resentment towards some of the people that would make these pronouncements that my parents, about their feelings. And I'm like, well, they're not here to defend themselves, but I can tell you what our private conversations were. And that I knew they were going to be supportive of me, whatever path I followed, And now that didn't keep me from, I have an ex-wife. We started dating the day before 10th grade. We got married between our freshman and sophomore years in college.
Wow.
Stupid. I mean, for not because we didn't love each other, but because that's stupid. It's just it was the week before I turned 19. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
And she and I could joke about it now. She's a great person. We've stayed close, all these years. And we're both from that, little tiny town. So um she happens to be conservative. It's interesting because when we were together, I feel like she wasn't, but her after we divorced and she found husband number 2, I know he's conservative, so I feel like
Mhm.
the trajectory of her life went a completely different direction. But
Yeah.
And I have so many questions about this.
I just wanted to ask because it sounds like I'm not sure how long was your mom sick for?
she was diagnosed as terminal in 76 and she died in 80. And
Okay.
and we did the math after she passed away, and she spent more time in hospitals than out during those 4 years. So it was very debilitating for her, and yeah, and sad.
I'm so
And then
sorry.
yeah, and then my father only lived till 87. So he had married my stepmother in between. So
Mhm.
I stayed with her, but by the time I was 17, I had buried both of them. And,
Mhm.
you know, he told me how much um, guilt my mother felt about, not because she didn't want me, but because she felt so guilty that I was we're not going to have a mother. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because she
Yeah.
knew she was going to die, or there was a big, big chance. And
Mhm.
so I hate that. I hate that for
Mhm.
her that she had that, feeling, but, and he understood where she was coming from, and tried, as well as he could, to kind of make up for that fact. But
Mhm. You said before that they didn't use the word codependent back then, but that they were very much intertwined. Do you think that her passing away had an effect on his then
Longevity.
longevity?
I do. It's funny when there's a story about when they were dating, he, as probably a lot of teenagers did, would drink way too much, and when they got married, even, they partied a little, and she kind of told him, like, you don't handle your liquor very well at all, so this needs to stop.
Mhm.
And she had that kind of control where she said, "You're going to stop drinking or I will leave you." And stopped drinking immediately. And from that moment until she became ill, he never had another. I mean, the story goes that he never had another drink. The bad part of that, I think, is that he didn't learn any moderation. And the
Mhm.
instant that she died, he dove into drinking. And
Mhm.
and, he kind of caused his own demise,
Mhm.
by just he had cirrhosis of the liver by the time he died. He died of a heart attack, but I'm sure it was brought on by
Mhm.
the constant drinking. I mean, I remember not long before he died, I remember asking him, I'm like, "So, I hear you get up a lot during the night, like, to use the restroom or whatever." I said, "But how long can you go overnight without a drink?" And he said, "It's down to about 2 hours now." He literally would have to get up and drink to be able to go back to bed and sleep. It was the most sad,
Yeah.
sad thing to watch your parent go through. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I wanted him to live. I wanted him to get himself, clean. He put himself into rehab like 4 times. I mean, it was self-destruction, to
Yeah.
Kenny's point. Yeah.
That's I'm so sorry that you went through that. I think that topic has come up a few times for us, alcoholism in a child's teenage years. What was it like I mean, you sort of just covered it, but what kind of effect do you think it had on you to lose your mother and then live with an alcoholic until he passed away?
Well, I mean, you know, I I in general try to think of myself as an optimist, and I can point to that time and say, yes, it was incredibly difficult, but I feel like it kind of helped me grow up
Mhm.
quickly. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it definitely happened. And because I remember mom died when I was 10, and he, like I said, was just like still working. I mean, and he would come home and immediately start drinking, and he started leaving his checkbook on the dining room table, and he would literally just throw the bills down, and he'd be like, "Can you take care of these?" And he would sign a whole set of checks, and I was the one writing the checks for the electricity and the, mortgage and all of that stuff. And, you know, people I guess the people at the bank figured out that, why does it look like a 10-year-old is writing these checks? But, in general, I was keeping that house
Yeah.
running, you know.
Mhm.
I remember he would be so drunk sometimes, and I'd be like, "Dad, you were supposed to take me to go get my new sneakers this afternoon." And I would call a cab and take myself. I was like that kid. I was like, just
Matilda-ing around.
yeah, I was like, "Dad, just go have another drink. I'm gonna go." And my hometown was so small that I didn't this is not a thing anymore, probably even there, but, like, we had, like, accounts at these little local
Oh,
stores
yeah.
where I
Mhm.
could just go to the store and say, "Charge my dad," and
Mhm.
I could
Mhm.
leave with the shoes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was a thing. But I you know, what other 10-year-old in my town was dealing with that kind of stuff? Not
Mhm.
many,
Mhm.
or not that I knew of.
Right.
And I was so proud that I would never have, like, asked anybody, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I also didn't wanna disparage him, so
Mhm.
I didn't share that with anybody,
Yeah.
I was embarrassed for him, and I knew
Mhm.
he was embarrassed for himself, and he would drive, probably drunk, he would drive 25 miles from where we lived, passing other liquor stores to go further out because he didn't even want people to see him buying the liquor. Like, this is the
Mhm.
level of self-hate he
Mhm.
had about the circumstance. It was so sad,
It is so, so sad.
and it still brings a tear to my eye to think that, you know, I tried as much as I could to help him, but there comes a point when it was his decision,
Mhm.
and
And you were 10.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I know. And I mean, I've always been mature for my age, but man, I felt like I had to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would literally he'd be like half drunk and I'd go into the den where he was sitting drinking, and I'd be like, we need to talk, man. You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
you need to get your shit together, and he would just break down and bawling, crying, I'm such a shitty father and I can't believe, your mother would be so, and I'm like, yeah, she would. So
Mhm.
step it up. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
that's
Like I was trying that tough love thing,
a
and
horrible, vicious cycle, it sounds like.
yeah, I felt so, and then, when he married my stepmother, who I warned, I was like, this is a hot mess over here. Are you sure you want to dive into that? And she and I both, though, have a savior complex.
Mhm.
And she's like, we can fix this,
We
and I
got
was,
this.
yeah, I was like, nah, I don't know about that. But, and she never did. I mean, I have so much respect for what she tried to do for him. But in some ways, like there were times when I begged her to leave him. I was
Mhm.
like, you're hurting yourself by staying in this messy situation. But she is one of those, nope, you get married for life.
Mhm.
And I was like, man, you're a better person than I am because I can't wait to graduate and get the hell out of here. But he died before I did, but I had no intention of staying in that scenario.
Mhm.
Well, it sounds like you had a good relationship with, just for very briefly, what we've heard, that you had a good relationship with your stepmom.
Very good. She was, well, the interesting thing about my stepmother, I think, is that I had always known her. My
Oh,
parents my
that's yeah.
parents used to hang out with her and her first husband, the father of her daughters.
Oh.
And it was weird because they were like 10 years younger than my parents, but they were friends. And her first husband had died, and um, tragically, like with a heart attack, very young. And she remarried, and her second husband died the same year as my
Oh
mom.
my God.
Yeah. And I will say, I knew both her
Sorry.
husbands, right? They were family friends, so we would hang out with them both. And I do feel like, you know, Joyce and my dad, I don't think they were ever really like in love. I
Right.
think they were
Mhm.
commiserating. I think,
Mhm.
she would call him and he would call her because they both just lost their spouses, and they were already friends, because people, again, my lovely hometown, when they started dating, people would say things like, "Oh, do you think something was going on?" While I'm like, "Really, assholes? No, that is not the way this went down. They were friends,
Yeah.
give them a break,
Tell
and
them your nickname for your stepmom.
oh, Shorty?
No, the other one related to her marriages.
Oh, we call her the Black Widow because
I was yeah.
because because my dad was her third dead
I was
husband,
gonna I
you
was
know.
gonna oh my gosh, I was gonna say Ricky sort of has this complex, because she's essentially had two fathers pass away. And it's a very big fear of hers that, losing people is a really big fear of hers. And she feels like
A
she
black
has
cloud
something
is
to do with it.
following me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Yep.
sounds like, well, I'm glad you can at least make light of that. I think that makes
She
it easier.
she did too. I mean,
Yeah.
because she lost my dad, right before she turned 44. That was her third dead husband by
Oh my
44.
God.
Oh,
And I
The
remember being
police are
in
gonna start looking at her.
I know. And I remember I was in college, and I remember one time I called her and I was like, "So 'cause she's never dated since the day he
Yeah.
died. And I would joke with her, I'd be like, "So you got in, why don't you go find somebody?" She's like, "Honey, when you have 3 wedding rings and 3 death certificates, nobody's knocking." And I was like, "Okay, good
that
point,"
is
you know?
Oh.
so
Morbidly
true.
funny.
She's
Yeah.
bad luck Chuck.
Yep.
Well, Joy sounds like a badass, and I love her already.
Yeah.
So,
So good to
before
me.
you witnessed both of your parents pass away.
Mhm.
Um, at super crucial ages. My dad passed away when I was 10, and every therapist on earth who deals in child trauma says whatever was going on when you were 10 years old is usually the most formative experience of your life.
Mm.
Do you remember your final moments with your mom, or do you remember ever being really introspective about the situation? And
Yeah. Well, I wish in retro, and I used to say this to my dad, maybe even when he was drunk, probably not the best idea. But I would say to him, gosh, I wish that I had really grasped that her last days were her last days,
Mhm.
because he sheltered me so much from what was going on that I didn't know that, in the last few weeks of her life in the hospital, she had coded a few times. They brought her back. You know what I mean? Like, it was imminent, right? And so, um, that made me a little resentful. Like, you kind of should have seen it real, that it was about to happen, because he let my last time with her just feel like a normal visit,
Mm.
and then school was starting. So she died on August 21st. It was the first day of 5th grade for me. And I'll never forget, I was staying with our family friends who had a kid that was exactly my age, a really good friend of mine. And that's where I was staying. And we had gone off to school that day. And back then, 5th grade in my school, that was the first day that you changed classes for every period. And I was so excited, like, I rushed to their house after school, and I wanted to give my mom a call and tell "That was so cool, I got a locker," and you know what I mean? Like, just to talk to her about it. And, the parents of my friend had already gotten the call that she had passed, and, um, I remember saying, "I wanna call my mom," and they were like, Kendall, your dad is on his way right now." And I immediately was worried, and,
Mhm.
our minister is who was driving my father, and because he had been there at the hospital when she died, and it was in Memphis, so that was about an hour's drive, and, the minister had driven dad to the Briley's house, and, I came running out the door, and then I saw the minister's car, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't good," and, I have only passed out a couple of times in my life, and, my dad told me on the driveway that, "Your mother died," and I fainted. I I it didn't feel real to me. I think she had been sick for so long that being sick was normal, but I never, like, in the back of your mind, you're 10, it's your first day of 5th grade. You don't think that your mother's gonna die? It was it was tragic, and I knew she loved me so much, and I adored her. She was such a great woman. Um, many, many people, thought so.
I'm so, and I want to give you a second, and I think I speak for all of us when I say we try to come into these interviews as blind as we can, so that we're not leading the discussion or jumping to conclusions, and are being authentic. And we had no idea how much we share in common with you, and like on both sides of the fence. And I'm so sorry, and thank you so much for sharing. And
Yep,
we completely feel for you, because we know how hard that is, and especially when that person is kind of larger than life and
yep,
everybody loves them. And absolutely heartbreaking. And again, like Ricky said, at one of like the most important times of your life. So
yeah,
it, I'm what you were when you were talking about the pool boy, because the first thing I thought when you had said that you thought you were bisexual at a young age and all that, I think I was like, oh my gosh, his mom passed away so young. I wonder if he ever got to like share any of that with her, or sharing like those moments with her. And it makes me so happy that you guys were able to have a few of
yep,
those little moments, and where she saw you and for who you are, and loved you for that. So thank
and
you for sharing, Kendall. I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one thing I guess I could have said about that is that I remember when she kind of had that realization, like, "Oh, Kendall might not just be straight." And she said to me, I remember her taking me away again, we're both glued to the window looking at cute Mike, and she, like, takes me to the den, and she's like, "Kendall, I want you to know you can be whoever you are." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just embrace it and just be a good person. And so when people try to judge me in my hometown, uh, you know, I get my back up. I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? If those two people who cared so much about me, could accept me for who I was, then that's all I needed,
Yeah. Gave you a
you
lot of
know?
strength.
Mhm.
And I think it's fair to say it's not even accepting you for who you were. It was
Mhm.
championing who
Right.
you were.
Right.
Big fans, which
Mhm.
is incredible.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if that is a common theme or trope of people who adopt children
Mm.
because they had to try so hard to have them that
Mhm.
everything is on the table. It doesn't matter. You can be
Yep.
whoever you are. We wanted you badly.
Right.
And I
And
hope so.
they treated me so well, and they were so proud of me. I mean, my dad could be very, demonstrative about like schoolwork. When I first got my first set of all A's in 8th grade, he's like, let's keep this going. You know what I mean? Like, you can do this. And I wish so much that he had been alive to see me be the valedictorian. You know what I mean? Like, that would have meant so much to him and to my mother, because they both, even though they weren't educated, they were very, very um focused on my education. That they knew that that was super important, and it was the way out of that town for me.
Ricky, are you feeling like you have a lot in common with Mr. Kendall here?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, I mean, we all know, every single person in this room knows how defining it is to have a parent who is sick for so long.
Mhm.
And we've been doing interviews, and I've been having to dig more into that. And you are saying it very simply as it happened. And I don't know how much any of us have taken the time to look back on that and say that was very unusual, and to tend to that little boy and those little
Mhm.
girls who are not living in a household where dad is out or mom is out throwing a baseball around with you.
Mhm.
They are in the hospital,
Mhm.
and you are spending a significant amount of time there, and you are having a hard time relating to any of the other 10-year-olds and what they're going through. And especially, yeah, having a parent dealing with substance abuse. And it just seems like we're all the same
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
I think about my mother spent 10 months in Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And I went up and spent like almost the entire summer there, just to be near her that summer. Um, these are things that I wouldn't trade, to your point, but at the same time, it was very unusual,
Really
for the
hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just for a quick second, and I hope this is the same situation for you, Ricky, Jules, and Kenny. But I never obviously got to meet Kendall's parents, adoptive parents, but he talks about them with such reverence all the time that I feel like I kind of do know them. And
Mhm.
just like little things like, because I like to cook, and he's like, oh, Rubel would do this, and have you thought about trying this, or maybe put this and that? And so it's like very rarely is it the negative stuff that comes up. It's almost always the positive stuff. And so
Right.
even though, they were only in his life for a short period of time, huge impact on who he
Mhm.
is, for sure.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And I think we all feel the same way. It's good to be able to look back with such fondness.
Mhm.
And I think that's a make Corey, you're obviously I mean we'll get to talk to you more, but to be able to support him through that. And I love that you feel like you got to know them too, because I know that is also really hard to know that your parents, oh my God, I'm just gonna cry so that they didn't get to meet like the love of your life, and that's so, oh, that's so hard. And so I'm sure that Kendall, you take a lot of comfort in that, and knowing that Corey feels that way, and that you guys are a support system for each other is really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, thank you. We're all a mess over here. And I'm glad to, again, have gotten to spend time with them. And I really can't imagine how painful it was for you and for your father to, I mean, you said he's so embarrassed, and
He
not all
was.
alcoholics have that presence
Mhm.
of mind. And I'm sure that he was seeing himself through your mother's eyes in those moments. And Joy is just such a trooper. So
Mhm.
thank you for telling us about them.
Mhm.
And so you're growing up, your mom dies when you're 10, your dad dies when you're 17,
16, right? Yep.
16.
At the end of my junior year. Mhm.
And I know you meet your soon to be wife soon thereafter. So can you kind of take us through what does a person do when they're 16 and orphan? I mean, I guess you had your stepmom, Joy.
I did.
So
I
did she
did.
just totally take the reins at that
Yep.
point?
Yep. So
Okay.
when she married dad, she and my stepsister Darla, who's exactly my age, they moved into our house, and so that was my family home. So that was nice because even when you know it felt different after my mother died, but at least we were still in the same home that she and dad had built together. And so when dad died, um, we already lived there. Joyce, it's funny. I've told this story on our podcast, but my mom's sister, my Aunt Pat, that I was so close to, she lived in my hometown. And legally, I was supposed to have to move in with Aunt Pat and Uncle Don when my mother died. When my dad died, because that's the way that my parents' wills were written, right? And Joyce had never adopted me. She was my stepmother. And I remember Aunt Pat calling me not long after my dad had died saying, "Well, you're supposed to come live with us." And I was like, I literally have one more year at the same school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've gone to this school my entire life. I'm about to be a senior. There's no way.
Valedictorian.
Exactly. I was like, there's no way I'm moving. And I would have had to switch schools if I had gone to their house because of where they lived. And that was a much less attractive school to begin with. So I was like, that ain't gonna happen. And she and I actually had some moments. Because she was like, I could take this to court. And I'm like, if you want to piss me off for the rest of my life, and the rest of yours, go for it, because this is not happening. And I said, I'm staying with Joyce, and she's a good parent to me, and she's always treated me like her own. And so Aunt Pat finally pumped the brakes, and because I had no intention of leaving. I was like, how stupid would that have been for one more year?
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations, because it speaks to how grown up that you had
Yes.
to become at such a young age. So to be able to put your foot down
Mhm.
to an authority figure,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's just very like fierce and
I
badass.
and I do think that, for good or bad, that's what I
Yeah.
got out of this whole scenario.
Yeah.
Honestly, I kinda came out of high school with this fierce mentality, like,
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want and step aside. You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
was it was very much like that, and, which, kind of is a good thing. It's interesting.
It's an incredible it could have gone very differently, right?
Right.
There are people that would have affected in a different way
Well
that would have kind of spiraled, maybe.
well well, it's funny because the only negative I can say about that is that I have had friends that are blatantly honest and said that I kinda came off as an asshole during some of that period because I was so headstrong and
Yeah.
because I had taken care of business and I wasn't taking anybody's crap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I can kinda see that." I think back about my interactions with some people, and I'm like, "Yeah, I probably did come off as, like, really forceful and
Yeah.
really my way or the highway type thing, you know?
Yeah,
And
I don't know
that
anything about that. That makes me curious. So kind of where we were headed, that makes me curious because it seems like it might be at odds with something else that you were going through. So you
Well, it
were
depends.
I know what you're about. So are you married a woman,
Right.
and
Mhm,
you said that you at a young age knew that you were at least bisexual.
mhm.
What is it? Are you bisexual or gay? And how did that inform your relationship with this woman?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were the only people, aside from like one friend, one high school friend that I would ever have said that to. So was it unfair to my ex-wife, who was my girlfriend at the time? Probably, but I I thought I was bi, and I thought I could be with this woman forever, and that was my intention when we got married. And, you know but it's interesting in retrospect, she and I have said to each other that, it automatically felt weird. Like, it felt strange, like, it feels like I married my sister, you know what I mean? Like, it
Mhm.
was just that kinda weird, like, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to be. Um, but, we were good. We were gonna give it a good try, so 5 years later, we're separating, and that was grueling. I mean, she was in love with me, I was in love with her as much as I could be at that age, I guess, and, it was devastating,
Yeah.
for both of us, and, we'd spent 9 years of our lives together, 4 years dating and 5 years married, and for where we were in our lives, that was a long time,
Mhm. Yeah, a good
and
fraction.
yep, and it was horrible. I would never wanna put anybody through that again, for emotionally, it was just grueling, and then, I'm so happy that she and I have remained friends after all of that because it says a lot about her, I
Mhm.
think. A lot of people have been like, "Thank you very much, have a nice life, don't ever contact me again," you know?
Does she remind you I'm totally, totally making an assumption here, this might not be true. Does she remind you of Joyce at all?
She reminds me a little of Joyce, but more of my mother.
Your mom?
Mhm.
Yep.
Because I think too, you had seen a marriage that you said that reminded you more of a friendship
Oh, with Joyce,
with
yeah,
your dad and Joyce. So
yeah.
I'm wondering if there were any similarities and maybe you
Mhm.
found comfort in that your marriage with your ex because you had seen a marriage that seemed like more like a friendship.
Maybe. I mean, that's not what I wanted, and it's not
Yeah.
what she wanted for sure, and, but, we were going to college full time, we were working full-time jobs on top of it. Like, in some ways, we used to joke and say, "How did we stay married anyway?" You know what I mean? Like, how did that even
Regardless, yeah.
happen? Right, like, how did that even happen? But, we she, is very headstrong too, like,
Mhm.
"We're gonna do this, and everything's gonna be fine," and for the most part, I mean, we did, like, she graduated, so we both graduated from the same department, and we both got sociology degrees, when we got our bachelor's, and she graduated top of the class, and I was second to her. So, I mean, we definitely
And then
not
they
be
got divorced.
Yep, yep. I'll show you. But no, no, I mean, it's not that we were competitive at all, we just were both really good students. She was
Yeah.
salutatorian in high school when I was valedictorian.
Oh my gosh,
So
it's a age-old rivalry.
Yes.
yeah,
I
well,
love that.
we were that sickening couple in high school, like, we were prom king
Power
and
couple. Yep.
queen. Oh, yeah, we were that, gross, but, whatever.
I
It was
love that.
Be
fun
proud of it.
and
Be proud of it.
great, and I wouldn't change anything about it, but we both kinda laugh about how pretentious, all that seems now, it's like
I am obsessed with it.
I love it.
yeah.
Okay, so I know it seems like it's probably a little bit painful, but can you tell us about how this this marriage came to an end and
Mm.
how was this brought up? How you know what I mean? What
Yep.
happened?
Well, like I said, we were together married for 5 years, and it really honestly, it took us, like, 3 years in for us to kind of ever even say, like, "Is everything all right?" You know what I mean? Like, and we went to therapy and, we tried so hard. And I remember so we went to therapy together and then we went separately. And I remember having the private conversation with the therapist. And, she said to me, she's like, "Kendall, I don't think you're bi. I think you need to dive into the gay pool." And I mean, she was in, I didn't want to hear that. I mean, that devastated me. I'm like, I can't mess up her life like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't the plan. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to work for me. And I mean, I was, without being graphic, I mean, I tried all kinds of things to try to cure myself. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want it to be true. And not because I thought at that point in my life, it's like I had gay friends, and it wasn't like I thought there was anything wrong with it. It just I'm like, that can't be me. I'm
Right.
I'm I'm with my wife. Like
Yeah.
that would be crazy. But finally, she and I, probably 4 years in, were like, what are we fighting for? And I mean, not that we still didn't. I had even moved into our spare bedroom before I even moved out. Like we were trying to still, at that point, I feel like it was just a facade that we were trying to keep,
Mhm.
like, well, everybody thinks we're a couple, so we're going to be a couple. But it wasn't healthy.
Mhm.
And she, would agree with that now. But I mean, at the time it was brutal.
Yeah.
It was so hard. And, again, while she and I had moved away and gone to grad school in Illinois, meanwhile, Joyce and her parents are still having dinner together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're friends.
Mhm.
And because I didn't tell you this part of the cool story. My mother was an HR person like I am, and the way she met my stepmother was that she hired her into the company, and
Oh.
then she hired my ex-wife's mother
Oh my
into the
god.
Oh
company.
my gosh.
So there is a photo of my stepsister Darla, my ex-wife, and me as infants in the same picture
Can
because
we?
Oh.
Can we have
Yeah,
that
we
picture,
want
yeah.
please?
that. Yeah.
I have to ask permission, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
just but that's how small town, you
wow.
know what I mean, we
Yeah.
were. And, so how incredibly awkward for me to call Joyce and say, um, "Remember," I mean, she and I had never really had the same level of conversations that I have with my
Right.
mom and dad,
Right.
but I was like, yeah, I'm probably gay." And, Joyce she's always been supportive of me. She was not at that moment. She was like, "This is wrong." Like,
Mhm.
not from a, "You're
Right, right, right,
gay,
right.
that's
Yeah.
wrong." It just you can't do that. You can't
Mhm.
break up your marriage. You can't treat her like, I'm purposely not saying my ex-wife's name. Um, you can't treat her that way after 9 years. You know what I mean? It was a
Yeah.
respect thing for her.
Well,
And,
and you had mentioned that, you had begged her to leave your dad, and she's
yep,
marriage
Stick with
is,
it.
yeah, stick with
absolutely.
it gal.
Yep.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
and you're right, because she said, "You took those vows,"
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Oh, yes, so now she and I should just live the rest of our
Right.
lives not as pleased as we should be just because
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
said that in church." Like, no, that's not happening.
It's such an interesting story that I don't think is told very often. And that's why I jumped in to cut Julianne off to make sure that we addressed that you had initially thought you were bisexual, because I didn't know how big of a factor that would play into this. And
Mhm.
it's honestly really refreshing to hear. In Schitt's Creek, there are lots of gay characters, and homophobia doesn't exist in Schitt's Creek. Like that's never a thing, and the audience found that really refreshing. So to
Mhm.
hear from you that it had nothing to do, you didn't marry a woman as a facade or because you were trying to stifle yourself. You really just thought
Mhm.
that you were bisexual, and then it ended up that you weren't. But it's really
Right.
nice to hear a perspective where it wasn't, I was living a fake
Right.
life.
No,
It
no.
was just a journey of self-discovery, and everyone, the reason that they weren't necessarily supportive of the divorce had nothing to do with your sexual identity and everything to do with the commitment that you made to another person,
Right.
I think is really interesting.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I have run into my ex-father-in-law a few times in my hometown since. Could not have been more polite, could not have, you know what I'm saying? Like, just
Wow.
they're
Yeah.
just good people. Like,
Yeah.
that whole family has treated me with more respect than I ever expected, quite honestly, because, that
Well, you
was
met your ex-wife's current husband.
I did.
Yeah.
So when Corey and I were living in San Francisco, gosh, this was probably 2015, I'm thinking. My ex-wife called me and said, "Hey, my husband and I and the kids are coming to San Francisco," and she wanted to see me, which I thought was
Yeah.
great. So I met them for lunch. They actually we had lunch really near my office. It was just great, and it was the only time I've physically, met them, but it was great, and it felt very natural. It wasn't that
Mhm.
weird. I mean, it's always going to be sort of awkward. Like, oh, I'm husband number one, you're husband number two. Good for us, But apart from that, her husband was just really great, and it was wonderful to meet their son together. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was really
I
fun.
have I have a couple well, I have an observation and a question. It kind of seems like your parents were able to cultivate like a really kind of cool group of people in your tiny, tiny little town. So I think that's very cool that they were able to like surround you with some really great people. I also am wondering because so with your ex-wife, you guys were still living in this small town?
We went to college 1 year at the
Mhm.
community college, and then we moved to Arkansas State University.
Mhm.
That's where we graduated, and then we moved together to grad school in Illinois. And that's after the first year of grad school is when we separated.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I was just wondering because um, it seems like you kind of wanted to like get out of like the small town kind of a vibe. Maybe she didn't as much, and maybe that also kind of affected your marriage too. Because I know, like, I would feel stuck a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ironically, after she finished grad school, after we divorced, her second husband lives in a smaller town than she and I are even from. So it's just comical to me because I'm like, she calls herself what does she call herself? The Zsa Zsa Gabor of her little town because
Oh my God.
her husband's a farmer, and I remember the first time that she called, and I'm not talking about crops, I'm talking about like animals, and she's
Mhm.
like, "Can you imagine that I've learned how to slop a hog?" And I'm like, "I don't even know what that means, and I don't want to know." I was like, "Good for you, girl. Did you break a nail?" I was
Oh
like,
my gosh, that's
"What?" You
hilarious.
know,
It has
because
multiple meanings, but yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just comical, and in some ways, I find it bizarre. Like she, super super smart woman,
Intelligent, yeah.
and successful in her career, but I never sort of imagined this as her path.
Mhm.
She's very very happy, so
Yeah.
good for her, right? But Corey would kick me if I said we're going to go live in that little town. Like, really, that size? No.
That'll be a no. Okay, so I want to know which part of the story comes next. Is obviously we want you to hear we want to hear about you meeting Corey, but which
Yep.
part, because we haven't gotten to, we're getting up to the family twister, or
Right.
what we want to learn about for our second half here. So tell it in your own order. I want to hear about those two things. Tell us about meeting
Yeah.
Corey and what you found out.
Yep. Okay.
we have to fast forward 10 years.
This is true. So I
Oh my God, I bet the middle 10 years are juicy.
that talk about some more hot mess moments.
Oh,
Yeah.
my.
Which have nothing to do with my father. I met so after I divorced, I jumped into a relationship with kind of one of the first guys that was interested in me, right? And I should have left during that first week, but again, I can fix things, so I gave it 4 good years. No, 4 bad years, and that did not end well. And left when I broke up with him, I moved from the area where I went to grad school in Illinois. I moved to St. Louis, and it wasn't just to get away from him. That was a plus, but it was for work, and
But you were also hiding, like you were hiding from him.
yeah, yeah.
If it's okay, because I was wondering if there was any of that kind of component here. Do you feel comfortable sharing anything about why you say that relationship was
Yes.
a hot mess?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I hate that he is not here to defend himself. He died, in a tragic accident a few years ago, but,
I'm sorry.
um
He's doing that. You and Ricky are like the same person. you guys were like each other in a former life. All right, sorry. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
I'll take it.
We should not be laughing about that. It's just
No,
you.
I
Yes.
hear
Okay.
you. Well, he couldn't deny the things that, I would say because he I have never even when my dad was at the height of his alcoholism, he never was like physically abusive to anybody. And I'd never been around that. And my ex, the man, he he became, and I don't mean like he didn't beat me, but he did hit me. And the third time he hit me in the 4 years, I said, that's it. I mean,
Mhm.
it was I'll never forget, it was Thanksgiving Day, 1997, and he hit me, and I said we were supposed to be driving down to see Joyce, my stepmother. We were gonna go hang out with her for the day and her family, and, I left and I went down there and actually I took a few days off work and kinda stayed with her for a while because I was so distraught, and as embarrassed as I was to tell her I'm ending this relationship, which she already politely had told me she thought was a bad idea, and she was right. I was mortified, and again, I wanted it to work, right? He and I, this is before anything was legal. Um, we'd had, a commitment ceremony where I think there were like 100 people that, you know what I mean? Like it was a big deal, and we were committed, and that did not end well. And Corey's right. After I moved to St. Louis, he was kind of stalking me. I had moved to St. Louis. Target had recruited me to come work at store manager level, at the store level, and I remember, I would see his I don't know how I tried to tell all of my mutual friends with him, "Don't tell him where I'm working." And the Target, there at the time, I think there were 26 Target stores in St. Louis, like the St. Louis metro area, so it wouldn't have been easy for him to figure out which store I was working at, but I would see he had a very unique vehicle, and I would see it in the parking lot, and I remember telling
So scary.
the women that worked for me directly, I said, "If you ever see this car outside, please let me know." And, one night, one of the women that worked for me came in and said, "Kendall, I think that car is out there." And sure enough, that night, all 4 of my tires had been, sliced, when I went out to leave. And I was worried that I was gonna have to get a restraining order against him
Yeah.
at some point, but thankfully he moved, down to Memphis, and I think he finally like, got it that we weren't gonna be together.
Well, and the crazy thing is that's not even the ex that I found mugshots of. There's a
That's true, that's true. Yeah, that person never went to jail, but my second, ex, yeah, did go to jail. Fun times, fun times. Not while we
Same.
were together. Not not
Yeah.
while we were together, but, yeah. So I moved to St. Louis.
And I have a question about that. So yes, we are the same person.
Yeah.
I don't know if you listened, but my ex-boyfriend was abusive, occasionally physically, mostly emotionally and mentally.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um And he did end up dying by suicide. So that's
Mm.
why I was exasperatedly listening to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in entering that relationship, I am so curious, even though it did turn out poorly, did were you able to say like, oh, this feels right. This
For
feels,
sure.
yeah.
For sure. I was 24 when we met. I felt like I was finally sort of an adult. I felt really like, this is gonna work, and it did feel right, and we were, you know, accepted as a couple really in that town, and that felt good. I needed that sort of that validation, I think, coming out of the whole thought that, I I needed to almost do that for myself because I had just ended this 9-year relationship, with my ex-wife, and that, you know, you grab onto things sometimes, right? And I think that's what I was doing to some degree, but it felt very, right, except that to your point, Ricky, this guy, I mean, within the first few weeks, I saw glimpses of the emotional, way he would treat me. I mean, it was just, and he could also pull my heartstrings just right.
Mhm.
He knew
Yep.
how to play me and, took money from me. You know what I mean? Like they're just,
And it's such a
um,
confusing, like, experience when you're someone who is so intelligent and so, strong-willed to find yourself in a situation like that and be like, how is this happening to
I
me?
know.
How Yeah.
Yep. I remember because when a couple of people would meet him and be like, is everything all right?
Mhm.
Because he was so I'm demonstrative, but he was so demonstrative too, and, people would pick up on that, like, "How does that work?" You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
because he seems like he could be somebody that would be difficult if you
yeah.
challenge him, and people picked up on it, and I should have run, I should have made a beeline for the door, but I
Did
didn't.
did you feel like he, when and what people would see, did you feel like he dimmed your light at all?
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. He trivialized
Mhm.
things that I was proud of. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I where other people would, be happy for me, like, "Oh, you got a promotion," like, "Oh, well, I think it should be better than that." You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, "Well, what are
Mhm.
you doing?" You know what I mean? Like, "What the
Yeah.
hell?"
Yeah.
"Here, can I give you some more money?" You know what I mean? It's like, just it was irrational,
Right.
and again, I'd never really dealt with it, so it was very new to me. I was
Mhm.
like, "I've never been with a crazy person," and and this is new, and again, savior complex, I can fix this, I
Yep.
can fix him. But then, there was an outward part of him where other people would meet him like, oh my gosh, he's so charismatic, he's so great. And you just suck that up and like, oh yeah, yeah, it must be great.
Sounds like pretty textbook.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. A, because it's just difficult, and it's unfortunate to hear that that was your first like relationship where you were living in your truth and that's how it went. But I do
Hmm.
think it's really important. I don't know if you've read In the Dream House by
Mm-mm.
Carmen Mikado, I think, but it's
Mm-mm.
about a pair of women who are in a relationship and gets into how prevalent abuse is in same-sex relationships, and it's
Mm.
just not something that people ever talk about at
Mhm.
all for some reason. So to just bring that to light, I think is really important, and I
Hmm.
can't really imagine the confusion when it's 2 men and you're in
Mhm.
love and it's coming to physical altercations because that's so much different from being a woman and being in an
Right.
altercation with a man. You're both so strong. I
Right.
can't imagine how difficult it is to de-escalate something like
Yep.
that.
I would
Well.
imagine that's why it's hardly ever talked about because I
Mhm.
think, between a man and a woman, there's a certain, like, power structure kind of illusion, I guess,
Mhm.
and when it's same sex, whether it be woman and woman or man and man or whatever, there's not that kind of illusion of the structure.
Well,
Mhm.
and people might just think that it's acceptable. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like
Right.
if you get in a bar fight with another guy, whatever it is, and if two girls are fighting, it's a cat fight. So they
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
that it's okay for some reason, which obviously it's
Right.
never is.
And for me, it was a pride thing again. Like, I
Mhm.
was so proud that I was like, I couldn't admit that I would be
Mhm.
with somebody that would treat me that way. I
Yeah.
just couldn't. I was, I wanted this to work. I'm like, if I'm gonna be with this person for that long, I really, really tried to make it work. But I, with that third time, I was like, I'm not your punching bag, and this is not.
Mhm.
I'm not happy anymore,
Mhm.
Yeah.
thinking that I have to worry about what your next reaction is going to be.
Mhm.
Sadly, I use the word insane. I probably shouldn't, but I mean, it felt like that. It was very bizarre, and
Mhm.
I was very physically frightened after I
Mhm.
moved. I was like, if he's coming, he was driving an hour and a half to slash my tires. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, this wasn't around the corner from his house. This man was focused on me and getting me back. Well, I don't know what your allure is.
That's probably not
Yeah,
the way to do it.
that's not
Yeah.
gonna
That's not gonna
Yeah.
fly.
Um,
Well, I'm so sorry you went through that. Thank you for sharing with us.
mhm.
And again, those 10 years in between, I'm sure that there was a whole lot of self-discovery going
Yep.
on, and everyone has heard what that looked like for us. So
Yep.
it's again more of the same. But yeah, fast forward to what you feel is the next best.
Yeah, definitely. It's meeting Corey. So I started singing in the Gateway Men's Chorus, which is a gay men's chorus in St. Louis, and one of our mutual friends, Jerry, was also in the chorus, and Jerry would occasionally do community theater, and a bunch of guys from the chorus went to see this play that Jerry was in, and it was Sordid Lives, which we're huge fans of the playwright, and we actually are going to have him on our podcast soon. Uh, and anyway, so I go to the play and with this group of guys, and it happened to be the very last night of the play, and so the cast party, Corey was in the play with Jerry, and so the funny thing is when Corey and I met at the cast party, one of the guys, who is a gay Catholic priest, I don't know how that works, but anyway, he was completely drunk and hanging all over me, and Corey thought that we were together there, and I was like, "Could
Get
you
off.
go away?" So I'm trying to talk to this guy, and so we kinda got separated at the cast party, and then the next time I saw Jerry at a choir rehearsal, I was like, "Hey, I was talking to Corey at the cast party, and I was really going to give him my phone number, but we got separated, and drunk, asshole was hanging all over me, so I'm not surprised he didn't run, but so." I said, "Hey, just give him my number. Maybe he'd be interested." And then Corey, you can tell, and then you saw Jerry too, right?
Yeah, I happened to be living like 3 doors down from Jerry. And so yeah, same deal. I'm like, yeah, it's weird, but I had this connection with this guy Kendall, and do you know what his situation is? And Jerry was just being very coy, like, no, I don't, but I'll look into it. I'm
And
like,
Jerry knew.
oh, he knew. Yeah.
He knew I was single. But so ironically, we were both trying to get our numbers to the other one, and finally Jerry did make the connection, and the rest is history. Like,
Did Jerry have a crush on one of you? Why was he dragging his feet?
I don't know. It was kind of weird.
Let us know, Jerry.
Yeah, exactly. Jerry is from Arkansas and has since moved back to Arkansas, so there's another Arkansas connection. Anyway, so I called Corey when I finally got his number. We hit it off immediately. we had the longest first date I think you could ever. It was like 8 hours or something. It was crazy, and the rest is history. We've been. I always joke with him and said that he can never forget our first date because it was 030405. So we started dating on March 4th, 2005, and yeah,
Love that.
I love that.
yeah.
I just want to tell people that I'm looking at these two handsome men and they keep throwing dates out here, and I have no idea how old you guys are, but you have to look. You guys look amazing.
Good answer. Good answer. If you have spackle, you can put yourself together. No, I turned 53 a week ago, and Corey's about to turn 48.
Yeah, you guys
Wow.
look
Yeah.
incredible. So you've been together
Damn.
for
18 years.
18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
often, and I know that we already on your podcast told you that you look like Paul Rudd, but
Yeah.
how often, Kendall, do you hear that you look like the guy? Hold on.
How did you not say
She was looking this up
It's-
earlier.
Corey Stoll.
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I have gotten that a couple of times.
It's uncanny. Uncanny.
When he's not wearing a wig for a role or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's been so amazing hearing about how you met Corey. That is burned in my mind now of 30405. We'll have to
be
wish you guys a
texting you on
happy
your anniversary.
anniversary. But I think it's probably best if we actually leave the audience with a little wonderment and talk about your adoption story and all of the discoveries that you've made about your adoptive or your biological family next time.
Cool. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. Again, we just had no idea how much we truly had in common because
Yeah.
you guys didn't do like a whole season about your story like we did because no one else is that megalomaniacal.
Oh no, we're gonna pepper those things back in. But
Yes.
So we're just so grateful to you and how open you've been. And we just so respect and admire how you show up and how you live your life.
thank you.
And I want to say
Thank
for
you.
all of us, I think you two are both such a peaceful, calming presence. We always love talking to you. So we cannot,
Cool.
Oh,
we
thank
can't
you.
wait to draw this out into
Yeah.
the two-parter. Yes.
All right.
And after we talked with you guys on your podcast, I was just so excited. I was just like, I cannot wait until we get to hear their
Yes,
story. And
Oh,
you did not
cool.
disappoint. So thank
Cool.
you guys so much.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
next time. You
Okay.
guys are lovely, lovely.
See you
Thank
next
you.
time.
All right. Bye now.
What beautiful souls.
We love them.
I adore them. I really love the way that Corey shows up for Kendall. He's obviously not a big part of the episode because it's Kendall's overall story to tell. But A, I mean, just him being there, and B, all of the things that he's done for Kendall and the way that he supports him through his journey is so beautiful. But what I most enjoyed about talking to Kendall was that he shares the same sentiment and affinity for his adoptive parents as you guys do for yours and as I do for them. I think it really highlights that the situation doesn't always have to be a deeply long-lasting traumatic situation, and just even the grace that he showed his father after his father kind of fell apart and was suffering for alcoholism. I feel like he really could have reflected on that any which way and chose to do so with total empathy and positivity. And I just think that they are solid as a couple of rocks.
Ricky making me cry. Not you making me cry in our own outro. They were, oh my God, such a pleasure. I could not have better things to say about both of them. And I did. I think the thing that touched me the most in the episode was Kendall recounting that conversation that he had with his mom at such a young age and being so comfortable to let his mom know kind of where his preferences were going at 8. I don't know if I've ever heard that in my life. And just that, I think exactly what you said speaks to the relationship that he had with both of his parents. And I just think it's so uncommon for the time, uncommon for the area, uncommon for the demographic, and just touched me how ready and willing he was to be open with his parents.
And on top of that, his mom also kind of reciprocating that conversation and being okay with having that conversation with her 8-year-old son, and just kind of knowing and accepting who he was, to the point where he didn't even really feel like he had to ever have that conversation with his parents, which I think is how it should be, honestly. Like, why do they have to have that conversation?
Yeah, we'll get to a point where coming out isn't a thing anymore. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, man. But I think what struck me was the similarities that I have with Kendall and just our overall feelings about parents. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I tend to come to the I'd go to bat for parents often. I often try and see and empathize with their decisions and how they kind of came to what they did, and just the fact that he seems to have done that as well, and empathizes with his father, even though he did have to kind of like raise himself. He doesn't hold any resentment or anything like that.
And he's almost grateful for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I just really felt a kind of kinship with my namesake. No, I'm just kidding.
Your namesake.
But I felt a kinship with Kendall for his sentiments in that regard. So I appreciated that very much. And he seems to have a good thing to say about everybody, which could also maybe not be so great sometimes, especially with his abusive relationships. But really loved them. They were lovely. And I remember when we interviewed them, just being so excited to talk to them about their story and not about our story. So
Yeah.
yeah.
They were really incredible, which is why we cannot wait to bring you more of them next week as we round out Kendall's story and Corey by proxy. In the meantime, we're signing off. We hope you leave feeling a little bit more normal in your own family dynamic, excited for the possibilities, and curious about the world around you. Have a good week, take things in stride, and leave people better than you found them. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.